So get your laundry sack bag or an air breathable bag and start gathering some walnuts as I show you all how to process these. In the case of identifying walnut trees, why does it matter to know that where walnut trees are growing? Well, there's something really important about walnut trees. They contain juglone. Juglone is a biochemical compound that's found within walnut trees and a few other species of trees, but most potently in black walnut trees to our area. And it basically acts as an herbicide and prevents other trees from germinating or growing in a given area. So unless a tree has co-evolved with black walnuts or is just resistant to juglone, a lot of the species of trees and plants that aren't will end up dying within a couple of years because they'll get poisoned and choke out by the walnuts. Now, this is everywhere and it's contained all throughout the plant. The roots, the stems, the bark, the husk, and the leaves. So wherever the leaves and walnuts husks go, that juglone will spread with them. Now, how can I tell if this is a black walnut tree? Well, if I look at one of the whole leaves, and this whole stem is one giant leaf, this is what's called a compound leaf. A compound leaf is one giant leaf that has sub-leaflets that connect to make one giant leaf. Another example of this would be honey locust trees. That's another example of a compound leaf. They are asymmetrical. So if you were to look at the leaves, one part hangs down a little bit lower than the other, and the leaflets themselves, have serrated edges. Serration is what botanists used to call those little jagged edges that you see at the margins of a leaf. So that's serration. And when they say asymmetrical, they're talking about one side of the leaf being a little bit different than the other. The biggest things to note about how to identify walnuts in general is going to be that citrusy smell that you get. Now, you can smell it in the husk themselves, but in this case, there's no husk or walnuts on this tree. But that same smell you're gonna find throughout the entire plant. So when you pick off a leaf, you can smell the edge of it and you're still gonna get that citrusy smell. Now, we're in front of another walnut tree, and in this case, this walnut tree that's right here is probably about 3 or 4 years older than the walnut tree that we saw over there. It's still not fruiting because it takes about 10 to 12 years before a walnut tree can even start fruiting. So this tree is probably in its late 20s, maybe even 30 years old. Maybe a little bit younger, but it's old enough to produce fruit at this point, so it's definitely older than 15 years. And in this case, we can really show you just how large the distribution of the walnuts are. Now, if you were trying to compost these and you had one of these in your yard and you were trying to grow tomatoes or potatoes, they're not resistant to juglone. So if you were to compost the leaves or the green husk into your compost, you may end up stunting your plants from being able to grow because they're going to get choked out by that compound that's in there. So I'll show you all the ground distribution of these walnuts and show you all a view of what it's like to gather some. Now, all of these green and these apple-like things that you see are walnuts, and at this stage, they're probably another great stage to harvest. I made the mistake last year of gathering these and grabbing all the black ones because I was trying to make dye and stain for wood. That was probably the nastiest shit I've ever done. Ugh. And then I found out those contain a lot of worms and maggots that you don't want to have to work through. So when you're gathering these, you want to get them, when you're gathering these for eating, you want to grab them when they're green like this. And then so you may want to wear a hard hat or something because when these fall and hit you on the head, it's not fun. Same thing with acorns. You think they don't hurt, but when they hit you on the head, it's like, ah. Oh, speaking of the devil, speaking of that, one just fell and made a big thud. In this case, you want to look for ones that are pretty decent size. These are about the average size of the walnuts that you'll find, but sometimes they can be almost like baseball size and they can be massive. So it just depends on how much walnut you want to get. When you try and crack these open after you let them dry in like a laundry sack, you want to gather a good handful of these, put them in a paper bag or breathable bag, and then let them sit for about 4 to 8 weeks. Then all you have to do is break them open and then crack it open, and then that's it. That is the final product of how you get the walnuts outside of them. And supposedly they kind of have a blue cheese-like taste. Now, because I messed up my first batch last year, I unfortunately was not able to try them. But this year, I'll be gathering some and trying them and seeing how they go. Just by gathering a handful of these, I'm only gonna grab maybe about 10 or 15.